Call meeting to order 3:32. I'll go ahead and start introductions. Sergeant Carson's EMS Director, Fire Chiefs. And we'll go down this way.
Teresa Rios, EMS Agency.
Susan Bledge, County Council.
Mike Petrie, EMS Agency.
Jim Stubblefield, EMS Agency. Mike Esslinger, EMR. Sean McRoberts, Emergency Physician.
Fred Clara, GMS Agency.
Jody Shaver, Citizen.
Michael Rakitis, representing ALS Fire, Monterey County Fire Chiefs.
Ben Hitchcock, IAFF Local 4513.
Paul Castellari, AMR.
Arla Spencer, Hospital Administration's SDNH.
Tito Ariano, AMR.
Julie Reed, EMS Agency. Stephanie Galvin, EMS Agency.
Jared Bagwell, EMS.
Paul Tomasi, representing Monterey County Law Chiefs.
Jeff Warner, Program Director, Rich Medical Holdings.
Do you want to go around the back? I see KSBW there in the corner.
I'm sorry, Felix Cortez, KSBW.
Kevin Penholzer, Monterey Fire.
Lulu Isala, AMR.
Karen Smith, Health Department.
Nicholas Prentice, paramedic.
Cassidy Valera, Florida.
Jamie Alexander, Police Fire. Michelle Florence,
Good morning, my name is Ross Elliott. I'm with the California Ambulance Association. And I'm here just to observe. We don't live in Monterey County, but we've got members of our association who are interested in the RFP in Monterey County. I want to make sure we end up with a level playing field.
Steve Brooks, EMS Agency.
Elsa Jimenez, Health Department.
Gary Vallejo, ES.
Okay. Public comment. Any member of the public may address the committee for a period not to exceed 3 minutes on any issue not on the committee's agenda. EMCC will listen to all communications but may not take any action. Do we have any public comment? Okay, hearing none. Approval of the past EMCC minutes, the March 14th minutes. Teresa did those, thank you very much. Have a motion to approve them?
I make a motion.
I'll second.
Second. Any discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstained? Okay, motion carried. Reports, Medical Advisory Subcommittee. We did have a report on there attached to your packet. Is there anything? No? And the same thing with EMS Operations Subcommittee?
Nothing else to report, really.
Okay. And the EMS Agency oral report?
Yes, that would be me. Thank you. I'd like to report on 2 things today. The first will be on a app, smartphone app the EMS Agency will be coming out with. We're trying to get it out by July 1st. It may be a couple weeks past that, but it will, it's one, the app, the process we used was ask stakeholders in the field what they wanted to see in an app. We ended up going with a company called CityGov App Inc. And it should be really good. It's going to be similar to apps that are used in other counties that have been very well received for the field. It incorporates everyone's comments, and we're excited to get that moving forward. The second thing I would like to talk about is the investigation. And I'm going to make a statement about it, and I will issue a statement regarding the paramedic skills verification and paramedic accreditation investigation. I'm issuing this statement to ensure public health and safety, to assure that the public knows the Monterey County EMS system is intact and functioning, and to inform EMS stakeholders, the media, and the public. Currently, there's confusion within the EMS system. For example, yesterday, the EMS agency was contacted by field paramedics asking if the Salinas Fire Department could provide advanced life support. I want to eliminate that uncertainty and ambiguity which could undermine confidence in the EMS system. Because this is an ongoing multi-agency investigation, I cannot answer questions or provide additional comment at this meeting. The most important point to understand is the people in Monterey County should know that if they have a medical emergency, they should dial 911. They will receive a qualified first responder and a qualified paramedic ambulance, regardless of where they are in the county. The public can be confident that all paramedics working within the Monterey County EMS system have had their skills verified and can professionally provide treatment. I'd like to advise on the status of where we are right now in the EMS system. All paramedic service providers, both first response and ambulance, are currently providing paramedic level service. At this time, no organization status as a paramedic service provider is affected. Again, if you have a medical emergency in Monterey County, dial 911. I'd like to provide the relevant background so people understand what is going on. In late 2017, the EMS agency conducted a review of paramedic skills verification and paramedic accreditation. This review included all advanced life support agencies, both first responder and ambulance. Earlier in our review, the EMS agency identified deficits and transitioned the review to an investigation focused on irregularities in paramedic skills verification processes and paramedic accreditation processes. The EMS agency contacted California EMS Authority, which we must do under statute. They are responsible for paramedic licensure and licensure-based discipline of paramedics. The EMS Authority opened and is conducting an investigation related to the licensure of individual paramedics. The Monterey County EMS agency is cooperating and working closely with the California EMS Authority. The Monterey County EMS agency remains responsible for assuring the integrity, operations, administrative and clinical control of the Monterey EMS system, including actions involving all paramedic service providers and continuing education training providers. As soon as training or skills verification deficits were identified, to protect public health and safety, the Monterey County EMS agency directed all paramedic service providers to verify their paramedic skills using a curriculum and training collateral developed by the EMS agency and approved by Dr. James Tubblefield, the EMS Medical Director. The EMS agency also required each paramedic service provider organization to provide us with proof of training. All paramedics in the Monterey County EMS system were retrained by February 15, 2018. The EMS agency has met or will meet with the leadership of each paramedic service provider organization, specifically the signatory to the paramedic service provider agreement, when we have finished evaluating the evidence for that organization. No organization has been or will be blindsided by the EMS agency's actions. Because this investigation is ongoing, we cannot comment until the review and investigation is complete. The EMS agency will not specify the specific agencies involved or not involved in this investigation, again, till it's complete. However, when that investigation is complete, we will provide comprehensive information. The most important points are that the people in Monterey County should know in a medical emergency, dial 911. You will receive a trained and qualified first responder and a trained and qualified paramedic ambulance. The public can be confident that all paramedics working within the Monterey County EMS system have had their skills verified and can professionally provide treatment. For specific questions about each organization, please reach out to that organization directly. For other questions, please contact the Health Department Public Information Officer, Karen Smith, at 831-540-8606 or 831-755-4639. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, April 13th, 2018 letter from California EMS Authority to Costa County EMS Agency.
I guess this is mine too. I wanted to share this letter with you because since it was sent to Contra Costa County on April 13th, it's been talked about by probably every stakeholder in California. And I think it's germane and instructive for Monterey County in the development and release of our RFP. I'd encourage all of you to take the time to read this at your leisure, but there are a couple of points I'd like to highlight. On page 1, paragraph 1, under Introduction and Summary, the first paragraph, where it says the EMS Authority has concluded its review of Contra Costa County's 2016 EMS Plan update and denies the plan as submitted. Further, the EMS Authority rescinds approval of RFP 2015 CCC as part of the local EMS plan. Excuse me. This is very important because what it is saying is that the EMS Authority can and will deny an EMS plan and or an RFP process in real time or retroactively if they determine that the process is not fair and objective. So if it's a flawed or partial process, 3 years, 5 years, 7 years down the road, it can still be invalidated. The EMSA can invalidate the RFP and remove the state's antitrust immunity. Without antitrust immunity, we would have an illegal monopoly, and we could not maintain that if challenged. Therefore, we'd be unable to enforce it. Most EMS systems in California, including the Monterey County system, would not be financially stable without an exclusive operating area. The application of legal doctrines that are referenced in this letter, such as bid rigging, bid suppression, collusion, anti-competitive behavior, are relatively new when applied to EMS in California. However, they're not new legal doctrines. One of the things we'll talk about in a minute is the responsibility of the EMS agency, and in particular the EMS Director. I want to be clear and on record that I will not be on the wrong side of the federal Sherman Antitrust Act, the Clayton Antitrust Act, and the state of California Crawford Antitrust Act. These laws have strict civil, financial, and criminal penalties tied to them. So I am completely vested in having an objective and impartial process. The next point that I think is very important is on page 2, paragraph 3. And it's the paragraph under the bold number 1. And it requires the local EMS agency, which elects to create one or more exclusive operating areas in the development of a local plan, to develop and submit for approval to the authority as part of its local EMS plan, its competitive process for selecting providers and determining the scope of their operation. What's key there is that the EMS authority must approve the competitive process and the RFP document. It used to be almost a ministerial action where EMS agencies would send them up. There was very little comment, it would come back. It really isn't like that anymore. In the past 2 years, some RFPs have been denied, they've been held indefinitely, and the LEMSs, in some cases, have been told to rebid. And I know there are RFPs up at EMSA right now that are likely going to have major changes before they can be released. The other thing, there are 2 other points that I think are key to this. One is it's the EMS agency that is responsible for developing the competitive process for selecting providers and determining the scope of their operations. And deviating from the RFP as approved by EMSA violates state law. I believe the last, actually 2 more. I'd like to go to page 2, Title 22, or I'm sorry, Title 2, where it simply says that EMS agencies are responsible to conduct a fair and competitive process. And that's something that this agency is going to take very, very seriously. The final comment I have is on page 3, paragraph 3. Once the county designates a local EMS agency, that local EMS agency has independent responsibility of the designation of exclusive operating areas and selecting providers. We are responsible, and we're held responsible by EMS authority to prescribe a process that would be fair and competitive and ensure that politics does not influence the EMS agency in the development of the RFP. The EMS agency also has a professional responsibility to uphold state law as part of California's two-tiered regulatory structure for EMS oversight. This is really different than it was in 2005 and 2010. These issues weren't seriously looked at, but they are now. And for people who aren't following, there's litigation. Clearly, there's going to be litigation about Contra Costa County. And most of us in this room will probably be retired by the time it's resolved. But there will be litigation in other counties, and I think the EMS agency is committed to putting the people and the next patient first, and that's where the primary loyalty lies. So what we're going to do is have a process that is fair, objective, and as apolitical as possible. And that's all I want to say.
Great. Old business?
Is that
Sorry.
a question on that?
Sure.
I think the only thing that I see, Michael, we've talked at length on this, is that for every correspondence that comes either from Contra Costa and or their RFP, there's many more documents that come after the fact. I mean, we saw a very pointed letter from AMR's attorney threatening litigation with some of the assumptions that were made in this letter.
Right.
We know Cal Chiefs is probably going to litigate on this. So my only concern is something that is so contentious that, Cal Chiefs, want an element of this in court. Every day it's changing back and forth. So we don't know who to believe, right? But I would question that we don't use Contra Costa as an example for our process. I agree with the letter that you've prepared here that we're going to independently ask the state EMS authority on our process. I would not bring Contra Costa in the mix, even though the authority that's listed in some of the letter is correct. I would say, much like you said earlier, this is going to be litigated and we'll all be gone at this point. I wouldn't want to carry that process and kind of intermix, because if the court rules to find out there was no conflict, that it was a transparent process, then all of a sudden we've made an assumption that it was dirty when potentially it was not, or vice versa. So I say it's, this will be historical. At some point it'll be case law. We don't know the outcome. Let's not ride that issue. Let's keep our process parallel. And when the state says that the process, either you can be more transparent, or hey, because of competitive reasons, you have to keep it behind closed doors, then so be it. But you and I have talked. I don't know who to believe anymore, right? Cal Chiefs, I think California Ambulance Association obviously is watching this as well. And I'm just concerned that every day when this comes out, we're not getting the full picture, because there's 4 more documents that have come out after this.
Well, and I've reviewed the AMR letter. I have not seen the letter from the Contra Costa County EMS agency, but what I think is instructive on this letter is the points that I made.
Yes.
I'm not weighing in on what really happened up there, but what is really instructive is the state has taken away Contra Costa County's antitrust immunity, and they have said it's an invalid process. So, because I'm the one, at the end of the day, that will be held responsible, I'm going to have a very conservative, objective, and apolitical process. Because at the end of the day, I'm the one that gets lynched if it isn't. So that's the message.
Yeah, and I think the state, ultimately, it sounds like they're the final decision maker on that process. They carry some responsibility as well, right? So if we ask, much like your letter states, we're gonna check with the EMS authority and get their opinion.
Right.
And I think if we can do that sooner than later, then it cuts out a lot of this Contra Costa
Right.
fear factor that, you know, Contra Costa did have a court opinion saying, hey, what they did was not invalid. And so I don't know the
I'm not
status of
aware of
that.
that.
Yeah, so, you know, it's, I think they had or no, it was Alameda, excuse me.
Right, those
Right.
are two materially different fact sets.
So I think the intent was the same of both those RFPs.
Right.
But so it's such a fluid legal mess right now. I think from the Monterey County Fire Chiefs is it's changing every day.
Right.
Don't reference that. You know, independent, go to the state and get there. The buck stops with them really, in the sense of if they approve your RFP or not.
Correct. What I'm saying, and I don't know that we disagree, Mike. I think we're both interested in a political, technical process that best protects the public, ensures high-quality EMS at the lowest reasonable cost. What it comes down to, though, is we don't want to be in a situation where we have to go to court because we're challenged on the legitimacy or objectivity of our process. Because without the antitrust immunity, we have a problem. And because EMCC controls that, they're in a pretty strong position. And I think the next agenda item, actually, Susan Blitch, County Council, is going to speak to. And I think what we've tried to do is craft a solution that provides input, but still remains true to what 1797-224 requires.
Good. Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, anybody else? All right, then on to the stakeholder input for the EOA RFP.
That one would be mine. I'm Susan Blitch, Senior Deputy County Counsel. I think Chief Arcades summed it up already for me, and thank you. But essentially, recognizing that the EMCC would like to have input into a draft RFP before it is finalized, we developed a way where if the state signs off on it, that the draft RFP would be released to all interested parties, any potential bidders, this organization, any first responders that may be interested. Input would then be made by anybody who wanted to make input, including constituents. And at that point, the EMS Director would view the input and make the final decision on a final document. We do want to send a letter to the EMS Authority to try, and I can't say what they will do, but it's my hope that they will bless this process, since no one is getting special treatment. It's a fair and impartial process. Everybody would be getting the draft RFP at the same time. It would be posted on the county's website. That they would bless that process. We'd like to do that before we release a draft RFP, and in fact, I'm not even sure there's a draft RFP to release yet, so that we are comfortable given all of the litigation that is occurring in Contra Costa, Alameda, and other areas. It's a more conservative approach. If we have their blessing, we feel comfortable to do that. And with that, if there's discussion or questions.
No?
Susan, timing on that, you think? We'll be able to ask for that question?
I can send out a letter to the EMS Authority next week. I just want to consult with our contracts purchasing office, who will be facilitating the RFP process. As far as how long it would take for them to get back to us, I'm hoping quick turnaround, but I can't promise that.
And in your correspondence that was prepared today. It says the ultimate decision on the content of the RFP will be remain with the EMS Director. That's for content. Would the ultimate approval of the RFP be with the Board of Supervisors?
No, pursuant to our ordinance, it's the EMS Director who would have the final say in the RFP process.
They can, at the end of it, they have to either approve it or deny it. They can't modify it.
So,
yay or nay.
Do the Board of Supervisors at some point have the ability for comment or recommendations or changes?
Pursuant to our ordinance, and I can give you a copy of the ordinance.
And I'm
Right,
thinking,
no.
history, and Susan,
Yeah.
you're familiar with this, is that
Absolutely.
many times it gets to the end, and then you have public
Right.
stakeholders that want to see changes or different response times. And is that still going to be a potential or no? I guess we're just trying, when we say,
So pursuant to the ordinance, the RFP would be done and approved by the EMS Director. Then the selection process would take place and there would be an RFP review panel. At that point, when a contractor pending contract negotiations is picked, the board has the right to either accept or reject that selection.
Based on this action, is it possible that the RFP timeline would be adjusted? Or do you anticipate that the RFP timeline will stay as published?
It will probably have to be adjusted.
It would be my hope that the state could turn it around quickly. I personally don't think it's a complicated legal issue. I think what we're proposing is common and a fair process, but it would be out of my hands at that point.
So I'm sorry, just so I'm clear, we'll go out, but the comment as far as before supervisor gets it, there is an option to do that or not, for a time or?
No, the draft RFP would be out to the public as a
Yes.
whole. So anybody who wants to provide comment or input on it can. After that, the final RFP would be determined by the EMS Director.
ALS service provider agreements?
I can speak to this. Yeah, this fire chief's asked that this be brought up at March 14th EMCC meeting. I think the main concern was getting a draft paramedic service provider agreement out. Since then, we've done two things. To those jurisdictions that assert 201 status, which essentially means they have continued to provide service in the same scope and manner since 1980 without change or interruption. We have sent to them an agreement or an extension by which they can extend their existing agreement to January 31st, 2020, which is the end of the EOA agreement with AMR. To the other paramedic service provider jurisdictions, we have sent out a draft document for their review and comment. We received comments back last Friday from Chief Panholzer, and we're going to be scheduling meetings with each jurisdiction to discuss those. And that's kind of where we are.
EMS data system.
We're not doing C?
Oh, sorry, did I skip one? I'm sorry, I beg your pardon, EMS trying to rush this meeting along. Not really.
I'm happy to talk.
EMS 2030 Phase 2 EMS System Strategic Planning Process. I'm sorry.
You can take this over. No. We had hoped initially to bring the EMS system strategic plan to this committee meeting. Jay Fitch is actually having some surgery, so he isn't able to come out. So we're going to defer it to the next meeting. We have received public comments. We're going to be reviewing those and presenting the draft strategic plan to the EMCC at the July 11th meeting.
have one.
Okay.
EMS data system.
So you have a staff report on where we are with the EMS data system. The big news in that project is that we finally, after a fairly lengthy process, got the final data sharing agreements out. Our legal team, the writing team, basically determined that we needed 2 agreements for the county. One that deals with our QA, QI efforts here, and another one that deals with turning our data over to the state as CEMSIS, California Emergency Medical Services Information System data to the state. So those are out now. It took much longer than we would have liked. I think we lost some momentum during the development of those particular documents, but they are out now. Recently, I sent an email which gave everybody a deadline of May 25th to get those signed agreements back to us. Once we get basically a perfect storm of those agreements back, we can schedule the end user training. That will take place over 5 straight days. There will be 10 different trainings, and what we'll do is we'll go to different parts of the county so that people won't have to drive too far necessarily to get that end user training. So it's been a long process. We really are now, I think, at a place where we're close to operationalizing our new EPCR data system. I think that will be a great thing for the county. Thank you to everybody for your patience, but we are finally close. I know I've said that before, but it's true this time. We really are close. Anybody have any questions, comments?
So Fred, we appreciate your patience. It sounded like there's a lot of legal input from different agencies. So that final that's out now is kind of the last.
It is the final. Yeah, we got some comments back from Chief Panholzer was one of them, reads everything very carefully. We made some of the changes that were recommended, probably about 80% of them, but there were some that we didn't make, and that was based on input from our legal people, some of the things that we thought were necessary to remain in the agreement. But overall, I think they're pretty fair agreements.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Good question. Do you anticipate putting out ones with the most recent typos?
Yeah, we're trying to figure out, we might be able to do that. We're basically, we send out a letter which says, here are a couple typos. We're correcting those so we don't have to send the new agreement out to everybody. The same thing with your last comment also. Those were very small, 3 things out of the 3,000 we've dealt with so far. So we're getting there. And thank you again, everybody, for your patience.
So the letter will go out to address the, I just saw the email from you, said it was to be sent out again one more time.
No, we're probably just going to send, I think we're going to be able to send a letter which says there are 3 typos.
Okay.
You can initial those on your copy, we'll initial them back and that kind of thing. Hopefully. Hopefully.
I'd like to recognize and thank Fred Claridge for managing this project. It's a very complex undertaking. There's a lot of work on his part. He did a terrific job. I'd also like to recognize the EMS data group, composed of stakeholders from many of the organizations within this system. I think we're going to end up with a top-notch county-wide data system, and it's thanks to all of your work.
Okay, EMC system performance metrics.
So up on the screen, I'm going to display a graph of the disaster communication drills that are conducted daily by EMS dispatch and the hospitals over the past year. These are done to ensure a state of readiness in case we do have a disaster. We have a phase 2 process we're working on down the road on how we will use EM resource for patient management, MCIs, destinations, and stuff like that. But this is the daily performance results. So they do an 800 drill test daily and an EM resource drill daily. There are 5 facilities that we track compliance with, the dispatch center and the 4 hospitals. Marked improvement, we have just a couple, there's really 10 compliance data sets, and 6 of the 10 are all at or above compliance, and of the 4 that are not, there's only 2 that are just slightly below the 95%, which is a very high bar. So you can see where we are as of, this is April's data, and then it goes back to April of 17. Some of the things that has happened since last month is we've been monitoring the compliance and did find that there was some dispatch was recording a couple erroneous 800 drill compliance measures, but we basically found that the report that they were using was a little bit cramped for data, and so there was some just misreading of a yes or no, and then we were able to go back and listen to the 800 drills to ensure that the compliance was actually done. So that was one of the things that we did find with last month's data, but EMS dispatch has changed their forms to just make it a little bit clearer. They were doing MCI and other drills and putting it in the same area, which would cause a little bit of confusion. So that's where we are with EM resource and the 800 drill respectively. Any questions or comments on this?
And then on to the contract compliance working group.
So that would be me. So every other month we meet with the contract compliance working group. We go over a metrics report that's submitted by AMR, and we also show our response time compliance data. It's been nice over the past few, I guess, year and a half or so. We've had an epidemiologist on staff. We had Pat full-time until a few months ago. Now we have Rob Voss part-time as an epidemiologist. It's really nice having somebody who knows their way around numbers and data. So this is our response time compliance report for both dispatch performance and ambulance response time performance. You can see, could you go on to the next one? I think it's a little easier. You can see that when the new CAD was implemented, I believe in February of 2017, we decided not to count that month because we knew there would be a lot of technical challenges with the implementation of the new CAD. We also knew that it would take the dispatchers a while to get used to it. So what you can see in this graph is that obviously that took place in April, May. The dispatchers were still getting used to the new system. There were still some relatively minor technical challenges, but they did impact how quickly the dispatchers could get the calls out. By contract, they're required to get the call out in 59 seconds or less. So you can see in June, they started getting below the 59-second mark, and since then they've gone well below their contract requirement. This is really pretty amazing. When you look at what other systems do, some systems have a 90-second requirement, some have a 2-minute requirement. So for our system, as tight as it is, to get those calls out in under 59 seconds, that percentage of the time speaks well to how our communication center is working. Anybody have any questions about that? Okay, the next one. So this is AMR's compliance by priority. There are two different ways that we deal with AMR's response time compliance. One is compliance per the contract. The other is compliance for how we adjudicate penalties, fines. So you can see that overall, if you average all of their priorities in a given month, they're looking pretty good for overall compliance. It's based on the priority, which is how acute the call is, and the zone. And the zones are basically geographical areas in the county that are determined by population density. So overall, they're doing a lot better than they were. Back a year or so ago, they were having difficulty with this overall compliance, and we sent a number of letters to them letting them know that they had to improve their overall performance, and they have. You can see here that overall they're doing much better. Next one. Now we go into individual zones. The green zone is the most populous, are the most populous areas of the county, the Monterey Peninsula, Salinas, areas like that. So you can see that in all of their priorities, all of those acuteness levels, they're doing well in the green zone, and you would expect them to because that's where most of their resources are located, because that's where the call volume is. Next one. In the yellow zone, a lot of those boxes are blank because they don't get up to at least 100 calls. Per our contract, before we start looking at whether or not they're compliant, they have to have at least 100 calls in that particular priority in that particular zone. So when you start getting down into those lower population density zones, they don't have as many calls, and that's why you see so many blank spaces. But in the yellow zone, they were doing okay. Next one. The orange zone has been traditionally the tough area for AMR to be fully in compliance in all their priorities. The orange zone is basically the very northern part of the county up near Prunedale, and then sort of down the 101 corridor, not the individual cities like Greenfield, Soledad, King City, places like that, but the sort of rural areas right around those cities. It's a tough area to serve because they don't have as many resources in those areas. There's also a small strip that sort of parallels the Carmel Valley area that Monterey County Regional is responsible for. So they're still getting fined when they don't meet compliance in the orange zone for whatever priority we have enough calls to measure. They have put on a new, is it a 12-hour unit? Right? A new 12-hour unit to try to bring this compliance up. So we're continually working with them because per the contract, they have to be meeting their response time requirements across the board. And then the next one. The red zone is the wilderness area. Basically throughout the county, Monterey County has a lot of wilderness area. So rather, and it doesn't have a response time requirement. Basically, it means that you get there as soon as you can. It really might be out in the middle of nowhere. So rather than putting a percentage of compliance, what we've started doing is just putting the number of calls in those areas. And you can see that priority 1 predominates, but they're not held to a response time requirement in those zones. Next, I think that might be it. Anybody have any questions about the response time reporting? One of the things that the CCWG asked for at the last meeting was a breakdown of, for that orange zone, how are we doing in individual areas? For example, King City versus Soledad versus Gonzales. We just figured out a few days ago a way that we can use the First Watch system, which is the automated system that we use to break down by jurisdiction how we're doing response time wise. It's really nice. It's one of the nice features of that system. And so as we sort of intuitively understood, the breakdown is pretty even. They have a tough time up in the Prunedale area and then in those various cities going down the 101 corridor, and it's all pretty evenly split out. And that's what some of our citizen reps wanted to see. Is it just one area like King City, for example, that's getting the short stick? And it really isn't. It's pretty well spread out through all those areas. So we'll be presenting that at the next CCWG meeting and then at future EMCC meetings once we get that dialed in. Yes.
Can I give some context to the next part of the presentation? For about the last 2 years to 18 months, the EMS agency has worked with AMR on improving the quality improvement and reporting program. And we asked AMR to do a presentation today for the EMCC to share the information that they've been sharing with the contract compliance working group for the past, like I said, 18 months to 2 years. What you'll see is that it goes far beyond response times. EMS systems based on how fast something gets there are really a thing of the past, and it's going to getting the right resource to the right patient in a necessary amount of time, and then treating or referring or transporting that patient to the right location the first time. So the metrics to evaluate competency and performance have really changed. And that's what they've been working with us on. They've done a really good job on producing reports And, maybe at the end Jody could speak to it. She sits on the contract compliance working groups. She's familiar with what we're going to show now. And, for Mike and Tino, I appreciate you taking this information and presenting it to the group.
Thank you, Mike, and thank you for the floor, and thanks, the chair, and committee members and audience. So my name is Florentino Ariano. I'm the operations manager for AMR, and what I'm going to be presenting here is about 17 slides of about 17 areas that we report in our operations. This is kind of a scorecard of where we're at operationally, clinically, our customer service, and some financial stuff in there that we do to support the system within our own division. Again, things that we look at here in these reports is, are we doing things safely? Are we doing things timely? Are we doing things efficiently, effectively, and are these patient-centered for the patients and our customers? So again, this is a snapshot of the last 12 to 15 months of data that we put together. And Terry, you can go to the next slide. And showing you where we were at. So for priority one, Fred just went through the rest of the priorities, but I wanted to kind of report on our priority one, our emergency responses that we've had in the last 15 to 12 months. And as you can see, like Fred had indicated, for priority one, we did have some issues in that November area in the orange zone through December. We did start seeing an upward spike in January when we started adding our Greenfield unit to capture those calls that we were missing in the priority one timeframe. So as you can see, priority one in the green zone is usually our urban areas. We were well above 90%. Priority one yellow, kind of in that suburban, and then we get into the orange area where it goes more into the rural, and of course the red is our wilderness area. So we've been maintaining, we've been readjusting our system status plan to meet those demands for our county. We can go to the next slide. So during our operations throughout the month, days, and hours, we definitely have areas that we cannot serve very quickly and timely. That's when we have requested mutual aid, or we have it in place as automatic aid, which, for example, Cardinal Regional Fire Ambulance will be a lot closer to that Highlands area than we would coming from the peninsula. So as you can see, the automatic aid, we do have a high number of those calls that we request for service inside our exclusive operating area that the other agencies are able to capture. Our true mutual aids, where we have other agencies, Monterey Regional Fire and Carmel Regional Ambulance and Santa Cruz County, come in to help us out into our areas that we didn't have any units. We had low units at that time. So it's a low number compared to the automatic stuff, automatic calls, but nonetheless, we are showing this. Next slide. And this next report chart is calls that we provide our service outside our exclusive operating area. San Benito is one of our counties that we do help them out very much. One, because we do a lot of interfacilities. We pull a lot of patients out of their Hazel Hawkins Hospital, CCT, and bring them back to our hospitals in the county. So that's kind of one of the reasons why we have such a high call volume out of San Benito. We do support and help out Carmel Regional Ambulance as well when they're short or we're closer to the response area. We'll take the call, and of course, Santa Cruz is one of our lowest mutual aid we provide out Santa Cruz. So we also report and track calls that we get dispatched as code 2 non-emergency, and then are either upgraded to emergency transport or response. So in this chart, you see starting from December 16th that we had dispatched our ambulances code 2, and then they were upgraded code 3. Those are very low numbers, and usually the root cause of this is from the fire departments getting on scene, identifying the patient actually more critical, or law enforcement getting there and saying you need to step them up and get them here a lot sooner. We look at also calls that are being dispatched code 2, and then they are transported code 3. Majority of these calls are due to getting dispatched to hospitals. We get there, air team, staff, or or the request by the physician is to transfer this patient code 3 now to a STEMI center, trauma center, or to the airport.
Tino, can I make a real quick comment right here? I think it'd be helpful for the audience to realize that we're talking about 30 to 40 calls a month. And what is your monthly call volume?
For interfacilities,
No, just all call volume. So we're talking at these numbers represent a
They're-
teeny
yeah, they're a very low
percentage of your
percentage, correct.
Call
Our call volume monthly varies between, I believe, 2,000 to $2,500 calls. So, yeah, these are very small percentage.
Very, very small.
Yeah,
percentage.
we might have in 1 month, 9 to 7 calls. Total responses. But this is good to know, especially for our code 2 transfers that are upgraded to code 3. These are the calls where the call started transporting and then the patient got worse and they ended up upgrading. In March, we did have an upward spike and then we started seeing a downward and then started coming back over again. So a lot of this, when I did the analysis, was based on paramedic discretion. It was something that happened to the patient that they weren't feeling very comfortable with and they went ahead and upgraded. This is a good thing to capture for us because then we can look into more of the clinical part of it, quality improvement, continuous improvement on finding out what happened there so we can, our staff appropriately handle and treat the patient. So AMR is not a producer of runs or transports. We produce hours to meet the demand of our system. During our system, we can produce up to, in a month, up to 11,000 hours of ambulance staffed hours to meet the demands of our system. As everyone knows, the unit hour utilization is a ratio that is used industry-wide as a measurement of how efficient and effective our system is doing. What we do to calculate the UHU is taking the number of transports during an accounting period and divided by the total system transports. So again, once we have this ratio or this number off to the left of the UHU, the higher the number, the more efficient and more effective and of course more cost-saving for the patient. The lower the UHU, obviously it's more expensive and we're producing more hours and not doing our transports. So this is just a chart that depicts where we've been at with our unit hour utilization. The reason we have such a low unit hour utilization is because we have a lot of unit hours and some units do not do much work, so it gets costly. And the goal is to meet that demand with the supply, and we do have a lot of surplus ambulance hours. Again, we try to have a better system of implementing our system status plan, posting these ambulances where they can capture that next call. We also have to consider geography and area. Again, this is a rural community, so we have to strategically start placing our units in these areas that are probably not going to get call volume. So there we increase our unit hours and not doing any work. So again, it's a balancing act. And high performance system, it's dynamic, it changes, and we definitely are meeting these demands.
Tino, if I could add one thing.
Sure.
One of the things that we look at the contract compliance work group is the number of hours that AMR has scheduled in a given month and how many they were able to fill. And you want to see those equal, obviously, but in years past, there was a lot of red, which represented hours that they were not able to schedule, that they would have if they'd had the staffing. And so when we look at that statistic, we can see a direct correlation between the number of hours that didn't get stood up, so to speak, and how they do in response time compliance. So it's nice now that we see a lot less red in those tables and a lot more black, which shows that they have enough hours up based on what their perceived need was. That's a good thing.
Right, and we also look at hours that are wasted and be more efficient. Our hospital's drop times being more efficient on redeployment, deployment, our scheduling. We do lose a lot of hours when our units get pulled out of county, and we lose up to 6 hours of them returning back. Again, we have to adjust our system status plan. We have to start moving units around and to capture those calls. We go to the next slide. So this one we also report on on our mechanical failures and vehicle contacts. We broke this down into quarters, but this is something also we do on a monthly basis and report it to the county. It's all over the place, small numbers again, under 3 in a month usually, or even 0 sometimes. But again, we look at all this as well to make our system safe and effective. The Utstein report is a report that looks at all cardiac arrests in our county. And what I had done is pull the report from a diagram that was being reported and try to put it in a more simpler format so we can kind of understand. So this looks at our presumed cardiac arrest survival rates in the first quarter. As you can see, we had up to 60 overall cardiac arrests. Out of those 60, there was roughly about 25 or so that were witnessed by a bystander. A little bit, I think at 12, we got Ross in the field, and I believe 7 or 6 of them were discharged alive. And as you can see, you go through each quarter, you can see the response from bystander witness. If you look at unwitness arrest, lower chance of survival. We only had 1 in first quarter and in the second quarter. So again, with the improvement in getting a bystander CPR active at the time is goal for them to be having them survive. Getting our units there quickly, timely, has a better chance of improvement as well. Go to the next slide. And this one's non-traumatic etiology survival rates. Again, low survival rates. However, these were non-traumatic. These were more of the possible cardiac related events. But as you can see here, overall we had a high cardiac arrest, and as you can see, low discharge. So this is something we look at to start improving our training as well as our protocols or things like that. We can improve in that respect. So core measures is a state required data that we provide to the county that they've been reporting since 2010. I picked 2 out, not necessarily for any particular reason other than there's about 17 core measures that are reported to the state. The ones that I thought would be kind of nice to see and look at where we're at is the skill 1 is endotracheal intubation successful rate. As you can see, starting from December 2016, we did fair and a little bit bad and a little bit better, again, upward slope. And then the transport 2 or TRO2 is direct transport from on-scene to a trauma center. Again, this could be from ground to air. And again, we did okay. So another core measure that we also report is time on task. The 3 big ones that I thought were kind of important to see is our scene times for trauma, for cardiac, suspected stroke, and suspected MIs. So pulling this data from the core measures, we are not doing very good with this. This is something that we need to improve within our organization as well within the system to get these times lower. Again, there's many factors that can increase these on-scene times. Nonetheless, the trauma one is very, very worrisome for me because we should be out of the scene in 10 minutes or less. Paul, anything you can speak to on any delays that we could be causing this from the scene as a field provider in the last 20 years here?
Well, we're basically looking at these core measures. We're starting to try to pull the data from them and look into the specific cases. Obviously, as Tino said, the numbers here are unpleasant, and we're going to be looking at a case-by-case basis. There is circumstances beyond the ambulance crew's control that could delay this, and sometimes, you know, if you could get off scene in 30 minutes, that's amazingly fantastic based on the situation. You know, you may have to cut somebody out of a car, you may have a very complicated extrication situation, and other times we should definitely be dipping below the 10-minute and maybe even into the 5-minute realm. So we're looking at these specific calls, trying to learn from them, and then educate on the go forward to improve our times on scene on these especially these 3 core measures.
Are those outliers pulled out, like extrication or inaccessible?
No, at this time it's coming to our attention that this is an issue, and we're gonna start digging more deeply, looking into specific instances, pulling out the outliers, anything that, you know, if we have a root cause that makes it impossible, that has to be taken into consideration, and this is just the overall average, so we don't have any sort of differentiation at this time.
Next slide. So we also report and track our paramedic staffing. Since paramedic staffing and recruitment is difficult throughout the state, this is one thing we've been tracking on a monthly basis. I put it, summarize it more in a quarterly view to get an idea of where we're at. Upgrade is essentially EMTs that work for us that have been upgraded into the paramedic level. We did have a high in the first quarter and started dropping because we put folks through school, so we started seeing an increase towards the end of the fourth quarter and first quarter of 2018. We hire, we lose. A lot of our folks that we hire move on to fire service, law enforcement, or nursing. Again, we encourage them to stay with us as much as they can, part-time if possible. But again, we definitely are always doing some recruiting. Next slide. So our in-house training, looking at how effective we are in providing better training in-house, as well as ensuring that they're getting the right information for county protocols. As you can see, we had a downward slope towards starting the second quarter down to the third, and the first, this was just a change in our operations and what we were doing. We provided less than 20 classes throughout the year, but a lot of these classes are up from 8 to 12 hours, depending on the type of class it is. Next slide. Public education is something that we're going to be working on this following year. We had looked at some of the education that we were recording, which were truly not public education, that were more courtesy standbys that we're doing at events to support the community. And I think we can still continue doing those, but have an emphasis on providing some type of education to the public on how to call 911. I think Paul just did a recognition of CPR to the public, things along those lines to make it more impactful for our community. Next slide. So we also track and monitor and report our tuition reimbursement to our employees. We track our class reimbursement. These are classes that our employees take outside our in-house training, and we reimburse for those classes. And then school tuition is for paramedic training. So we award a total of 5 scholarships to our employees that have met certain criteria, and we pay through school.
And I'd like to point out, this is also a conservative number. This does not include their books, uniforms, things like that, that we also reimburse for.
Next slide.
Just a question on that. Tino, with the reimbursement for paramedic school, is there a condition that they pay you back if they leave, or what's the criteria on that you're not sending someone to school and they leave?
Yeah, right. So they do sign a contract. Should they not fulfill the agreements in that contract, they will have to repay us in a payment plan. So if they fail out, if they get hired with another agency, they pay the difference. So the agreement is you work for us for 48 months and you don't have to pay us back. If you leave short of that, don't make the pass the class.
48 or 428?
Pardon?
48 months?
48 months.
48 months.
Yeah, and the payment is prorated basically on the number of months that you work.
And again, this is another, we track and look at our billing operational complaints every month and report that to the county. And we do have issues sometimes with our billing, which all of them are resolved, but we do still report on the clinical issue. A lot of them is just billed incorrect address, billed the wrong patient, something there that was incorrect and had to kick it back. The clinical complaints and operations usually are from the fire agencies or the county that have concern on our clinical process or operations, and we look into those, investigate, and respond back to them with a resolution. And the last slide here is our ambulance patient offload times by hospital in the county. Again, we track, report this to the county, and looking at how long it takes us from the time we get to the hospital or to the transfer of the patient to the hospital bed. These are very good times compared to other urban areas. However, we still have some areas that we're trying to improve to get our ambulance system out of the ERs and available for the system. SVMH has been the one that takes a little bit longer, and I think we had some discussion earlier about sometimes it's taken a little bit longer to give a report to the physician, which is great if we have that time, but if the system demands, we need to pull those units out. But again, this is a good measuring tool for us to see where we're at, what hospital times. So, any questions for me? If not, I will yield the floor back to Martha.
Thank you very much.
If I can just make a comment, I think that it's important for all of us to, we have a great story to tell here, and we're all part of that system. People also, I think that, they fail to realize that Monterey County is a really complex county to actually design a deployment system for. If you look at a place like Alameda County, which is about 800 square miles, Santa Clara County, which is about 1,300 square miles, and Monterey County, which is 3,700 square miles, roughly. It's a challenge, providing resources to those rural areas. It's easier to, have a unit up in, let's say, Alameda County, where you can, every call only takes about an hour to run. Whereas here, we have calls that sometimes that, one call can last several hours. So I think that this is a great story. It's not just, even though it's AMR's reports, it's not just us. As you can see, the hospitals, fire agencies, they all play a role in that. So I think that we all have a lot to be proud of, and I think it's great to put it out here. So thank you.
Thank you, Mike and Tino, I appreciate it. Where we're going with this, we're going to be approaching ALS providers, talking about similar reports from them, trying to describe performance of the system in more ways than simply response time is where EMS systems are all going. And I wanted people to understand that the EMS agency, we look at a lot more than just response times, which is, I think what we have focused on based on the way the contract's written, but it's really not the most important thing. So, but again, thank you both.
Okay, new business, election of the EMCC officers.
Would you like to have an election?
Oh, no. Okay, so I'm looking at current membership, so election of officers, do you know who we have as far as one voter?
What I can say is that everyone who is currently a member has asked to be reappointed, and I think it's largely a ministerial action, so that'll happen. Chief Tomasi, are you interested in being reappointed?
Yes.
Okay. So everyone then. Right.
And who are we missing as far as?
We're missing Harry Harold. I don't have the.
Harry's usually famous for putting somebody on the spotlight.
Right.
Appointing him chief, chairperson.
He actually sent me an email asking that Jody be nominated as the next president. And I'm
So moved.
who he do
Chairperson?
for the.
Good for Harry, even though Harry's.
Jump 2 years.
Okay, so we do that, that's, I'm assuming, okay, do we do that?
Let me just double check to see where it is.
I'm here for Cindy Williams, so I can ask her if she'd like to maintain her position.
Okay. You can't, but she was, so who do we have? Myself, Jody. Where am I seeing? Okay.
Yeah, there has to be a motion.
There has to be a motion. Yeah, I was just waiting to see if, or who's trying to, yeah.
If able to attend, I would have nominated Judy Schaefer as chair and Paul Tomasi as vice chair for the next year. That was his email to me.
So
But
moved.
it's a decision.
Does count as a motion from Gary? Is that okay, Zach?
No, he
Oh,
cannot.
he can't make a motion.
All right, that's
Chief,
your motion.
Katie's can make
I'll make a
motion.
motion that Jody is president and Chief Tomasi is vice president.
I would
Chair,
second
co-chair.
that. Motion and a second, any discussion? Hearing none, motion carries. Congratulations.
Thank
All right, and require memberships, we've already said we're still here. Okay, any announcements? No? Okay, well then, next meeting is July 11th. Here, same time, same place?
Yes. And we're gonna
Well,
try to
actually,
get the large
Cayenne,
number.
it says here, we're.
Yeah. Okay, we've got it secured.
One last announcement. Remember, we have the EMS Operations Subcommittee at 1 o'clock. So all of you who are on that committee, hopefully you can stick around.
Okay, well, the meeting's adjourned. Thank you all very much. Passing the first.